going to happen to Social Security and Medicare. Mary is 57, but has heard that changes may be in store for people 55 and under. And do I know what changes are probably coming? Well, the short answer is no, I don't know what changes are probably coming. I can tell you what I will support and what I will vote against every chance I get. I think that whatever we do, we need to make sure that we keep both Social Security and Medicare healthy well into the future. On the part of Social Security, one of the things that I will support is the lifting of the cap. So right now, somebody who makes more than $110,000 a year pays into the same amount as someone who makes less than $110,000 a year. If you lift that cap, then you would pay more, and that would actually help Social Security to be solvent well into the future. As far as Medicare is concerned, the real discussion that's going on right now is on one side of the aisle, we have folks who want to privatize Medicare and turn it into a voucher program, giving seniors a $600 voucher, and you go out there and try to find your own insurance company to accept that voucher. I don't think that's fair. I also don't think that it makes sense. I have a hard enough time dealing with insurance companies. I can't imagine my mom, asking my mom to do that herself. So I think that the best thing to do is to maintain Medicare as we know it, but also do a few things to, make it healthier. One of the things I'm proposing is allowing Medicare to negotiate for lower drug prices. The Department of Veterans Affairs is allowed to do this. So when the Department of Veterans Affairs buys medicines for its patients, they get a discount because they buy so much. I mean, the VA has over 800 facilities. And so it's kind of like when you and I go to the drugstore, if you're going to buy a small bottle of aspirin, it costs a lot more per aspirin than if you buy a family-sized bottle. You get a little bit of a discount. Well, Medicare doesn't get that discount. In fact, it's not allowed to negotiate for lower drug prices. So they pay full price for their first aspirin as they do for their 1 millionth aspirin that they buy. And I just think that just doesn't make sense. It's stupid. So we need to make sure that we allow Medicare to negotiate for lower drug prices, and that will save in the tens of billions of dollars, over $30 billion for Medicare. We also need to go after fraud and abuse. I am going to be co-sponsoring legislation that will go after the fraud and abuse that happens in Medicare. A majority of patients in Medicare receive the proper treatment, but there are a few cheaters out there. There are a few companies that are charging the government for patients that don't exist or for treatments that they never provided. And we need to go after those cheaters because they're the ones who make the system weak. So those are just a couple of things that are happening. We'll know more as the budget negotiations go on. I will tell you I don't support raising the age for Social Security, so you can count on me to vote no on anything like that. But if it comes to smarter government, being able to negotiate for lower drug prices, lifting the caps on Medicare, on Social Security, then I will support those proposals. All right, next question. Julie from Bloomingdale asked, what is my position on gun control? Well, first and foremost, I think that the tragedies that have happened across this country with the mass shootings affect all of us, regardless of whether or not they happen in our own hometown. I do support the Second Amendment. My family is a family of marksmen. My father was a competitive shooter. Obviously, in the military, I carried a sidearm, and I have a FOID card. So I support hunters and marksmen and people's rights to purchase a weapon and the right to bear arms. However, I think that there are common sense legislation that need to be enacted to make sure that we protect our children and we protect the public. So that's why I support a ban on large capacity magazines. You really don't need to have weapons that somebody can go into a room and in a matter of seconds kill literally dozens of people. I think that if we keep magazines to 10 rounds and lower, that is sufficient. I get questions on this from marksmen. Well, I like to go out to the range and I like to shoot lots of rounds. What about those magazines? And I said, well, part of being a good marksman is being able to change magazines. So it's really the mass shooters that we are worried about, and they're the ones who rely on these high capacity magazines. So let's get rid of those. I also think we need to have universal background checks. I think that it is wrong that someone can walk into a gun show and purchase guns without having a background check. I think that most people agree that we need to make sure that those who have weapons should be legally able to buy them, not the ones who are banned, such as felons or those with severe mental health problems. I also want to end this practice of straw purchases. I'm not sure if you're familiar with what that term means, but a straw purchaser is someone who goes and buys a gun for someone else who can't legally get one. So let's say you, in the case of the shooter that just happened in Connecticut, you know, the mom was the one who purchased the guns for her son who has a mental health issue, and he could not legally get the gun on his own. So she's a straw purchaser. We also had cases where in New York, a gentleman who was a convicted felon, he was out on parole. He'd been convicted of killing his grandmother, and he was out on parole and could not legally get a gun, but he got his neighbor to buy a gun for him. Well, people who do that, who buy guns for folks who should not have them and who they know legally cannot get guns, those folks should be punished. So let's end the practice of straw purchasing. I hope that answers your question on gun control. You know, this is something that we're going to talk through and we're going to work through it, but while we defend people's Second Amendment rights, we also have to have some sensible gun legislation. All right, next question. Mark from Elk Grove Village writes, I'm concerned that the sequester is causing cuts to education, including tuition assistance for veterans. Why are we cutting education when there's so much unnecessary wasteful spending in government? Mark, I agree with you. I think the sequestration is stupid. I think it is a self-inflicted wound, and if I could end it today, I would, and I will vote every chance I get to end sequestration. What sequestration does is it does an across-the-board cuts. It protects the Department of Defense somewhat, but even they have cuts, and then it really takes a majority of the cuts from discretionary spending. Now, discretionary spending sounds like, you know, that's just you know, income that's not that important, but that's not what it is. Discretionary spending covers education. So all of the federal dollars that come into Hoffman Estates and Elk Grove and Addison and Schaumburg and Lombard, all of those federal dollars that pay for Head Start programs, that pay for remedial reading tutors, that will support students with special needs, all of that money is gone. And that means that on average, our school districts are going to lose anywhere from a couple $100,000 to millions of dollars. It's simply wrong to be doing that. That's why I actually have proposed to give back 8.4% of my salary, which is the same amount that's going to be cut from the discretionary spending, as long as sequestration is in effect. It's, you know, I think it's important that I feel the same pain as my school districts, as my seniors, as the people back home in Illinois. And so I'm going to be writing a check back to the U.S. taxpayers every month for 8.4% of my salary as long as sequestration is in effect. And I'm going to work every day to end it, because we should not be cutting education. We should not be cutting healthcare. We should not be cutting programs that promote jobs in order to manufacture this political crisis. And we can come to an agreement on the budget and we can cut spending, but we need to do it in an intelligent way. My next question is from Joseph, who's from Hoffman Estates, and his question is anything being done to expedite VA claims issues? Well, there's a few things that are being done. As you know, I worked at both the State of Illinois Department of Veterans Affairs and the Federal Department of Veterans Affairs. One of the big issues is right now is a claims backlog. What's happening is the VA is supposed to look at your application and have a response to you within 125 days. That is the standard. Not all VA regions are meeting that standard. I think any week or month that a veteran has to wait for his benefit is a week or a month too long. The other thing that's happening is that when veterans get that ruling and want to appeal it and don't agree with it, they go into the appeals backlog, and there's over 1 million veterans in that appeals backlog, and that's simply wrong. Some of the things that can be done to fix it, The VA is, I believe, coming up with a totally computerized system for looking at benefits, so that some things that can be an automatic decision that can happen very quickly without having a human being look at them should be made immediately. For example, if you have an amputation below the knee, that is a 40% disability in the spreadsheet that the VA has. Well, that's an easy thing to have to be computerized as you're putting in your information and inputting the data. If a veteran has an amputation below the knee, it should be an automatic 40% without anyone having to look at it and confirm that. As long as that information is being put in by the physician, it should be automatic. There's a lot of those common sense things that can be done. I think the VA needs to hire more claims adjusters, people who look at claims and do a better job of training them and making sure that they can do their jobs. And this is where, you know, tying back to the sequester, this is something that with sequestration cuts and federal employees across government being furloughed, some of the people that are going to be furloughed are going to be these very same people who review claims. So you can expect that the backlog will get even larger if we continue to have the sequestration. Yet another reason that we need to end it. And then there are other things we can do as well between the VA and DoD. I sit on the Armed Services Committee, so I'm going to be looking at how does the Department of Defense discharge people and how well does the Department of Defense talk to the Department of Veterans Affairs to let them know that a Marine, a soldier, a sailor, an airman is being discharged and that the VA can receive them. One of the best things that can happen to our current service members is when they leave the military to immediately go to VA and try to enroll in the system. It's much better to do that now than it is to wait 5, 10, or in the case of Vietnam veterans, 40 years, because that just puts you into the backlog and it just takes too long. So if you have any questions on your VA benefits, please contact my office. I have a great person there by the name of Eric Whitaker. He's an Afghanistan veteran himself, and he will be working on all of the veterans issues in the district for my neighbors and constituents. So reach out to us and we'll help you process through your claims paperwork with the VA. All right, I have one more question. It is from Kevin from Itasca, and he's asking, what are you doing to improve roads and transportation in our district and to cut commute times for people who work in Chicago? Well, transportation is one of my #1 issues in the work that I do here in Washington on behalf of my neighbors. And in fact, we had a little bit of a victory on this very issue just a few weeks ago. The Elgin O'Hare Expressway expansion had sort of hit a roadblock. The Department of Transportation had made a ruling that was going to stop the construction from happening. I was very fortunate in that I had a chance to see Secretary LaHood. I talked with him. I said, Mr. Secretary, you have to reverse this decision. We have to begin the expansion of Elgin O'Hare. I'm tired of it not starting in Elgin or ending in O'Hare. In my staff, we call it the IHOP, you know, the Itasca to Hanover Park Expressway, not the Elgin O'Hare. So he did reverse that decision, and construction is going to be starting as soon as the snow is off the ground, and it may be starting within the next several weeks. I'm very proud that in my first 8 weeks in Congress, I've been able to help in a small way get the construction going. Once we get the expansion happening, not only will it create jobs, but it's going to help our commuters and it's going to help our businesses along the route to expand as well. I also am going to be working very, very hard here in Washington to make sure that we get federal funds for all sorts of other transportation and infrastructure projects. You know, on I-90, both in Schaumburg and Hoffman Estates, there are interchanges that need to be upgraded. You can't go east onto I-90 from Barrington Road. You can't go east onto I-90. And you can't go west on I-90, sorry, on Barrington Road. You have to go all the way out to Sutton. Those are the kinds of things we need to fix. We have bridges, overpasses that are crumbling that need to be fixed. We also need to do a better job of getting more public transportation and bus routes, and also try to get the train lines and to come out further and have greater service. So I will be supporting all of those efforts. Every chance that I get, I will try to work with the Department of Transportation, work with the administration, and work here in Congress to make sure that we get our share of funding dollars into the 8th Congressional District. You know, if you want to move people or goods into the city of Chicago or out of Chicago from the West, you have to come through the 8th Congressional District, whether it is on an airplane, whether it is on the roads, or whether it is on rail. All of those things need to come through us, and we are really at the center of the infrastructure needs for the entire state of Illinois. And I will fight as hard as I can to make sure that we get our share of the dollars. And we also get a priority. This is something the mayors have all told me. They've unified and we're working closely together to make sure that both the state and the federal government understands the priority for infrastructure in the 8th Congressional District. I don't have any other questions, and I'm taking a look to see if there are any more. That looks like it. So this has been a great hangout. I've really enjoyed chatting with everyone. We'll do this again. Sorry we got a little late start. We had a little technical difficulties, but I promise we'll do better next time. And thank you to Mary, to Julie, to Joseph, to Mark, and to Kevin for sending in your questions. Take care, everyone, and see you at home soon.